Okay, so yesterday we had a bit of practice with factoring trinomials that were in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. There was actually an a in front here, but we were practicing when a was equal to 1. And I didn't really specify that yesterday, but if you look at your notes, you will see that every single time we did this, a was equal to 1. So here's an example from yesterday, so just to recall what we've done. So in this case, we have to do a times c. Okay, so to do a times c, you just write it down on the side. Your a value is invisible, which means it's a 1. Your c value is negative 45. So we need a times c equals negative 45. Now you can go ahead and put b on the side. It might be a little bit easier. It'll take up a little bit less room. So your b value is the one that's in the middle. So it's negative 4. Don't forget the negative. And in this case, before we start doing any work, remember that a times c means finding the factors of 45. So when I take my calculator and I start with 1, I know that 45 divided by 1 is 45. So I know that 1 times 45 is 45. Remember not to work with the negatives just quite yet. 45 divided by 2 is a decimal. We want to disregard the decimals. 45 divided by 3 is 15, so 3 times 15. 45 divided by 4, the decimal. 45 divided by 5, 45 divided by 5 is 9, so 5 times 9. If we keep going, we'll do 45 divided by 6. That doesn't work, it's a decimal. 45 divided by 7. Just gotta clear that. That's a decimal also. 45 divided by 8. And then we loop back around to 45 divided by 9. Okay, so these are the three factors of 45. We have to look at all three factors and see which one can work to make negative 4. I know that 1 and 45, that doesn't work. 3 and 15, that doesn't work. So it's 9 and 5. Somehow 9 and 5 will work to make negative 4. So what I do here is I would go negative 9 plus 5, or you can write 5 plus negative 9. It depends which order you prefer. Okay, but we know that it has to have a negative in front of the 9, because when you check it, 5 times negative 9 is negative 45. So the two numbers, and I'll just go ahead and write it at the top here, your two numbers are negative 9 and 5. So these are the two numbers we need to factor. So we have two brackets that we need to open up once we have those two numbers. We just go ahead and put two x's, and our two numbers are negative 9 and 5. So here's negative 9, and here's positive 5, and we're done at that point. So maybe take the time to review some of those, and when I get back on Thursday, we'll go through the homework and see where we can get with factoring. Now, when there's a number in front of the x squared term, you need to factor it out. So this is where common factor needs to come into play, if you remember from last year. So we'll review it in these next few examples and see how this goes. So if you take a look at the numbers in front of the variables, we have a negative 2, we have a negative 6, and we have a positive 80. And all of the three numbers have a common factor. So I just write CF, and then I write down what the common factor is. In this case, most people will think it's 2, because you can divide all three terms by 2. They all have a 2 in common. But see how there's a negative in front of that 2? You need to take out the negative 2. So you need to make sure that when you write that in, you have that negative. So now that you have the common factor, just write that in. What you need to do is put an equal sign and put that negative 2 in the front. So what you end up doing with that is you end up dividing every single term by negative 2. So I put the common factor right over here. Okay, that's where the common factor goes. And then I open up a bracket. Then I do the actual division. So negative 2 divided by negative 2. Be careful, it's actually 1. And there's an x squared left over. Okay, you move on to the next terms. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is actually positive 3. And there's an x left over this time. You continue, you do positive 80 divided by negative 2, which is negative 40. So I'm just going to simplify this a little bit just by taking away this 1, because when we have a 1 in front of the x squared, it's not necessary. Now, if you want to leave it, feel free. That's okay. So now I'm left with this, okay? And this is a problem that we did yesterday. So here you're left with an expression that you can factor. Don't redistribute the 2, so don't start multiplying. That'll give you the opposite of what you want. Do not do that. You need to take the expression x to the power of 2 plus 3x minus 40 and do a times c and b. So a times c, in this case, your a is 1. So if you would have left it, you would have seen that it's 1. 1 times the c value, which is negative 40. And 1 times c in this case is negative 40. We'll do a little chart. The b value is the middle value, which in this case is 3. So don't worry about the 3 for now. Worry about finding the factor. You'll have to worry about finding the factors of 40. So I'm just going to pull up my calculator again, okay, just to show you what I'm doing on my calculator. And we need to work with 40. So 40 divided by 1 is 40. So 1 times 40. Then we'll go ahead and do 40 divided by 2, which is 20. So 2 times 20. 40 divided by 3. Oh, that didn't work. 40 divided by 3 is a decimal. 40 divided by 4 is 10. So 4 times 10. 40 divided by 5 is going to work. 40 divided by 5 is 8. So 5 times 8. 40 divided by 6 is a decimal. 40 divided by 7 is a decimal. And then we loop back to the 8. Okay, so 40 divided by 8, which is the last one that we had. So there are 4 factors that multiply to 40. So again, ignore the negative and take a look at your factors. And if you take a look at your factors, you'll be able to see that you could play around with 8 and 5 to get positive 3. So how do you get positive 3 with 8 and 5? Well, the easiest way, I would say, is to go 8 minus 5, which means that the 5 is negative. So when you put the negative as the 5, negative 5 times 8 is negative 40, so that works. And 8 minus 5 is 3, so that also works. So your two numbers are 8 and negative 5. Don't forget that that's not the whole goal. Your whole goal is to find those two numbers, but to continue over here. So don't forget to keep dropping down that negative 2. That's all you're doing with that. That's the only difference from today and yesterday. So you open up 2 of your brackets, you put an x here, you put an x there, and the first number is positive 8, and the second number is negative 5. So the only thing that's new today is that there's a common factor. Okay, so this is the only thing that's new. Other than that, we're still doing A times C and B method, and it's all the same. So let's do a couple more examples here and see what's happening. You just got to practice common factoring. So for example 2, we're going to common factor. Here you can take out a 2, but you want to take out the greatest common factor. In this case, what I would tell you is try to take the lowest number and see if it divides by all of these. So 4 divided by 4 is equal to 1. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. And negative 60 divided by 4, I believe, is negative 15. But that is something I will double check because I'm not sure if it's right. Okay, so I'm just trying negative 60 divided by 4. It is negative 15. Okay, so I know that each number, the 4, the negative 8, and the negative 60 can all be divided by 4, which means the common factor equals 4. So now that I know there's a common factor, I'm going to write down an equal sign and put that common factor right at the start. I'm going to open up the bracket right away. And this is where people get confused. So remember that the common factor is placed right here. Okay, your common factor goes there. And you need to find what goes on the inside. So we're going to divide everything by 4. And if you show this step, like I just did, it might be more helpful. So 4 divided by 4, this little part, is 1. but there's an x squared left over. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2, but there's an x left over. And then negative 60 divided by 4, as we did earlier, is negative 15. So we're not done here. This is the part that we need to continue with. So we'll go ahead and do our AC times B, because there are 3 terms, and we need to factor that. So I'm going to rewrite x squared minus 2x minus 15. This is the one that I want to factor. So my A times my C is equal to 1 times the C value, which is negative 15, and that's equal to negative 15. We'll do our little chart. Our B value is negative 2. Don't forget to put the negative, otherwise it'll change stuff. Okay, so factors of 15. Ignore the negative. So 1 times 15, 2 times nothing, 3 times 5. 15 divided by 4 is a decimal, so we don't want to work with decimals. And then 15 divided by 5 is looping back around. So there are actually only 2 factors of 15. So now we need to get negative 2. So 1 and 15, you can't play around with that. You can't add a negative to any of these numbers to get negative 2. But you can play around with 3 and 5. And the easiest way, I would say, is 3 plus negative 5 or negative 5 plus 3. It's your choice, whichever way you want to do it. But just make sure that the negative is with the 5 and not with the 3. So this works. Let's double check the multiplication. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15, so that works too. Which means our 2 numbers are 3 and negative 5. So once we find those 2 numbers, we can go back to the problem here. Don't forget to keep dropping that 4. Open up 2 brackets. We'll put x at the front of the second bracket, and then the 2 numbers are positive 3 and negative 5. And that's what I'm looking for. So remember that A times C and B method? That's very, very important in here, and so is common factoring. Okay, moving on to example 3. So example 3 has only 2 terms. This is not a difference of squares yet, because we have a common factor. So basically the whole point is to look for a common factor at all times. And in this question, you should be able to see that you can divide both the first term, and the second term by 2. Not negative 2 this time, because the 2 is positive. So once you have your common factor, put an equal sign, put your common factor in the front, and open up a bracket. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and then you have an x squared left over. And then negative 50 divided by 2 is negative 25. If you remember from yesterday, in this case, there are 2 terms. You can do the square root of x squared, which is x. You can do the square root of 25, which is 5 or negative 5. And there's a subtraction. So when you see these conditions, it means it's a difference of squares. And when you have a difference of squares, all you need to do is open up 2 brackets. So in this case, all you need to do is put an x here, put an x here, and there's a plus 5, and then there's a minus 5. So this is from yesterday, except I'm missing something. So think about what I'm missing here, and then write it down. And in this case, I forgot to carry over my 2. So this is not complete until that 2 is in the front. Okay, and that's the final answer. That's it. That's what you do with that. Okay. This one's a bit more difficult for example 4. Okay. Example 4 is dealing with a couple negatives and some decimals, so don't let that freak you out. Whenever you have something in front of your x squared, or in this case the t squared, factor it out. So say that there's a common factor of negative 4.9. So as soon as I find my common factor, I take that number, I put it in the front, I open up a new bracket, and I have to start dividing